The afternoon had started like any other, a routine visit to my friend's house to drop off notes and catch up. The sun was soft in the sky, casting golden light through the windows of the quiet neighborhood. The moment I stepped inside, however, the familiar home felt different, alive with warmth, scent, and an energy I hadn't noticed before. She was in the kitchen, preparing something that smelled incredible, a medley of spices, herbs, and fresh ingredients that instantly made my mouth water. My friend's mother, in her early 40s, moved with a calm, practiced grace. There was an effortless elegance to the way she reached for utensils, stirred pots, and arranged ingredients. Even in casual clothing, she radiated confidence and quiet beauty. "Come try this," she said, holding out a small plate. Her voice was low, smooth, and warm, carrying a subtle, teasing undertone that made my pulse quicken. Our fingers brushed as I took the plate, and though it was brief, the contact lingered in my mind far longer than it should have. I noticed the softness of her skin, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the aroma of the food, and the way her eyes met mine with a knowing glance. I took a bite of the dish. The flavors were vibrant, perfectly balanced, and I couldn't help but look up at her in genuine surprise. She smiled, a slow, teasing smile that made my chest tighten. "You like it?" she asked, her eyes glimmering with amusement. It was more than a question about food. It was a subtle invitation to linger, to notice her, to engage beyond the ordinary. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, closer, charged with a warmth I couldn't ignore. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of a wall clock, and the soft rustle of her movements created a cocoon around us. Every small gesture she made, the way she leaned slightly over the counter, the gentle tilt of her head, the casual sweep of her hair from her face, drew my attention in ways I hadn't anticipated. We exchanged small talk, starting with casual comments about school and mutual friends. But even in mundane conversation, there was a rhythm to our interaction, a subtle tension, a playful energy that hinted at curiosity and interest. Her laughter was soft and melodic, carrying a warmth that made the space between us feel smaller. Every glance, every movement, every slight brush of hands seemed deliberate, yet natural, creating a quiet intimacy I couldn't escape. By the time my friend appeared from another room, the atmosphere had already shifted. What should have been an ordinary visit had become something charged, layered with anticipation and subtle intrigue. A simple taste of her cooking had become the first step in a delicate dance, one that combined playful teasing, emotional connection, and the unspoken thrill of forbidden curiosity. The first taste wasn't just about food. It was the beginning of a slow, simmering attraction, a subtle awareness of her presence that would only deepen with every passing moment. The kitchen, the scent, her smile, the brush of her hand, it all lingered in my mind, marking the start of something irresistible, delicate, and utterly captivating. After the first taste, the kitchen seemed to hum with a different energy. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, falling in warm patterns on the countertop. But it was her presence that made the room feel charged. She moved around with effortless grace, arranging ingredients and tasting sauces, and I couldn't help but notice the subtle ways she carried herself. The tilt of her head, the soft sway of her hair, the quiet confidence in every gesture. "You really think you can handle this?" she asked with a playful glint in her eyes, holding out a spoonful of the latest dish. Her tone was teasing light, yet there was an underlying warmth that made my chest tighten. As I leaned forward to taste, our fingers brushed briefly. The contact was fleeting but electric, a gentle spark that made me acutely aware of every detail. The softness of her skin, the faint perfume that mingled with the scent of her cooking, and the way her eyes held mine, curious and amused. I tasted the dish and couldn't hide my reaction. The flavors were richer than anything I expected. She laughed softly, a warm, melodic sound that filled the kitchen. "See, I knew you'd like it," she said, her eyes dancing with amusement. Her smile lingered, inviting, teasing, and I found myself caught in it, captivated by the ease and charm with which she carried herself. The conversation flowed naturally, starting with casual remarks about school and friends, then moving toward playful banter about food and cooking. Each exchange was layered, subtle, and suggestive without being explicit. Every glance, every shift in her posture, and every small gesture, like leaning closer to adjust a dish or brushing a stray ingredient from her counter, carried a quiet, magnetic energy. I could feel the tension building slowly, like the gentle simmer of a sauce that promises something richer once it's ready. She offered me taste directly from her spoon, holding it close enough that I noticed the warmth of her breath brushing my cheek, and the playful sparkle in her eyes made the simple act feel charged. Our hands touched occasionally as we worked side by side, brushing against one another naturally, yet lingering just enough to create awareness. The tension wasn't overt or rushed. It was subtle, a slow burn that drew me in and made every gesture and glance feel significant. Her teasing wasn't just about food. It was about connection, about seeing how far she could draw me into her world while maintaining a careful, playful restraint. There was a rhythm to our interaction. I would respond to her banter with nervous curiosity, and she would smile knowingly, testing boundaries, lingering just enough to make the ordinary extraordinary. By the end of this brief cooking session, the kitchen had become a space of quiet intimacy. What began as a simple taste test had evolved into a subtle, emotionally charged dance. Playful teasing, accidental touches, lingering glances, all creating a slow-building tension. It was a delicate interplay of curiosity, attraction, and restrained desire. The first clear signs that this encounter would linger in my thoughts far longer than I expected. Later that afternoon, the kitchen had quieted. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the counters and illuminating the faint warmth in the room. The dishes were mostly finished, yet the energy between us lingered, unspoken but undeniable. She leaned over the counter, adjusting a plate, and her proximity made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't ignore. Her voice dropped slightly, soft and playful. "Taste this, then taste me." The words were layered, teasing, flirtatious, and yet framed entirely as part of her playful instruction about the food. My pulse quickened instantly. It wasn't just the content of the words, but the subtle way she said them, a warmth in her tone, a quiet confidence, a gentle smile that held a hidden meaning. As I reached for the dish, our hands brushed under the pretense of passing a plate. The contact was light, accidental, or so it seemed, yet it lingered longer than necessary. The warmth of her skin, the faint scent of her perfume, and the closeness of her presence made the simple gesture feel charged with electricity. Every brush of fingers sent a ripple of awareness through me, heightening my attention to every small detail. The soft glint of her eyes, the gentle tilt of her head, the slight curve of her lips as she watched my reaction. The playful whisper hung in the air, suspended between humor and something more. I couldn't look away. The kitchen felt smaller, the space between us shrinking with every shared glance. There was a rhythm to her movements, deliberate yet casual, that drew me in without forcing anything, a slow, careful dance of curiosity, restraint, and subtle invitation. She handed me a small spoon, guiding my fingers with hers ever so lightly. The contact was fleeting, yet it sent warmth spiraling up my arm, a quiet confirmation of the tension simmering just beneath the surface. Her eyes held mine, steady and soft, yet teasing, as if daring me to acknowledge the spark forming between us. I felt a mix of exhilaration and hesitation, drawn to her, aware of the boundaries, yet unable to resist the magnetic pull of her presence. Even a mundane act of tasting the food became a vessel for connection. Every movement, leaning closer to stir a pot, adjusting a plate, or laughing at a minor mishap, carried an intimacy that wasn't verbalized but profoundly felt. The kitchen, with its warm aromas and soft light, had become a stage for a slow-burn attraction, subtle yet undeniable. As the moment stretched, I realized that the playful teasing had opened a door. What began as casual interaction had evolved into an intricate dance of subtle touches, lingering glances, and unspoken understanding. The whisper, the brush of hands, and the careful proximity had transformed a simple afternoon into something alive with tension and curiosity. By the time my friend appeared from another room, the energy remained, charged yet restrained. The whispered connection had shifted everything, leaving a simmering anticipation, a quiet promise that this slow-burn attraction had only just begun. The hours after that whispered moment were a whirlwind of quiet tension. Each time I thought about her words, the brush of her fingers, or the glimmer in her eyes, my chest tightened in a mix of excitement and guilt. I had never experienced an attraction so subtle yet so overwhelming, a pull that teased at my boundaries and made every ordinary memory of her feel charged. I caught myself replaying small interactions over and over. The way she had leaned slightly closer while arranging the dishes. The soft curve of her smile when I reacted to a taste. The warmth of her hand brushing mine under the guise of casual assistance. Each memory was a spark, lighting a fire that refused to be ignored. At the same time, I was painfully aware of the social and moral boundaries in place. She was my friend's mother, a woman I respected, admired, and now felt inexplicably drawn to. Every lingering glance, every accidental touch, felt both thrilling and forbidden. The knowledge that this attraction might be considered inappropriate gnawed at me, mixing guilt with desire in a way that was dizzying. I began to notice her in moments I hadn't before. The gentle sway of her hair as she moved through the kitchen. The way her laughter softened when she was relaxed. The subtle perfume that always lingered nearby, warming the senses. Even mundane actions, reaching for a plate, stirring a pot, adjusting a towel, felt charged with intimacy. My mind dissected each gesture, each glance, wondering if she was aware of the tension growing between us. Every interaction became a test of restraint. I wanted to respond to her teasing, to lean in when she leaned close, to linger when our hands brushed, yet I pulled back, reminding myself of boundaries and the world outside the kitchen. That hesitation only made the tension more acute, like a wire pulled tight, vibrating with the energy of something dangerous yet irresistible. Her presence had become both comforting and disorienting. On one hand, she exuded warmth, confidence, and subtle vulnerability, a combination that drew me in effortlessly. On the other, her teasing and proximity stirred emotions I had never felt with anyone else. I was fascinated by her, curious, and yet acutely conscious of the age gap, the relationship to my friend, and the potential consequences of indulging these feelings. I began analyzing everything. Her tone when she spoke, the moments she lingered nearby, the faint brush of her hand against mine. Was it casual, playful, an invitation, or just my imagination running wild? The uncertainty was maddening and exhilarating all at once. Even when I was alone, her presence lingered. I could see her smile in my mind, hear the soft cadence of her laughter, feel the ghost of her touch. The attraction had become undeniable, woven into every thought, every memory of the day. By the end of the afternoon, I realized that something had shifted. It was no longer just curiosity or fleeting admiration. This was deeper, layered with emotional tension, restraint, and fascination. A slow-burn connection that I could neither control nor fully understand, leaving me on the edge of something thrilling and uncharted. As the afternoon faded into early evening, the kitchen no longer felt like just a place for cooking. It had become a quiet sanctuary where conversation and laughter lingered between us. The aromas of herbs and simmering dishes still filled the air, but now they were intertwined with something warmer, something more personal. She paused in her tasks and, with a soft sigh, began to share a story from her past, a memory about a passion she once had, a challenge she faced, or a small triumph she rarely spoke of. Her voice was gentle, almost hesitant, but carried a weight that demanded attention. I listened intently, drawn not just to the story, but to the vulnerability behind it. There was a quiet strength in her admission, yet a softness that made her feel profoundly human. As she spoke, her hands moved casually, yet every gesture seemed imbued with intimacy. A brief touch to her chest as she recalled a memory, a small brush of her fingers along the counter, a tilt of her head that made her eyes meet mine with unspoken meaning. These subtleties were enough to deepen the connection without a word of overt declaration. Our hands touched again, this time under the pretense of passing ingredients. The contact was light, fleeting, but electric. Her skin felt warm against mine, and for a moment, it was impossible not to notice how the small gestures conveyed far more than words could. The way she lingered slightly longer when our fingers brushed, the careful but deliberate closeness as she leaned over to stir a pot, all of it spoke to a quiet, growing intimacy. We laughed over minor mishaps in the kitchen, a spilled spice, a clumsy hand movement, but even the laughter carried a weight, a connection that went beyond humor. In those moments, the teasing and playful tension softened into something more personal. Trust, openness, and shared vulnerability. I found myself speaking more freely than usual, sharing thoughts and small insecurities I normally kept private, and she listened genuinely, with warmth in her eyes and a subtle nod that encouraged honesty. The space between us felt alive with unspoken acknowledgement. Every glance, every brush of hands, every soft laugh was layered with meaning. She wasn't forcing closeness, but the deliberate subtleties, the tilt of her body toward mine, the soft cadence of her speech, the small, almost accidental touches, created an environment where connection could grow naturally. Emotional walls began to lower on both sides, replaced by curiosity, comfort, and a slowly deepening attraction. Even when she returned to her cooking, the intimacy lingered. I noticed the way she worked, the small movements that revealed character, the quiet way she paused, sometimes looking at me with eyes that seemed to see more than I had intended to reveal. Each gesture, each fleeting touch, strengthened a bond that was emotional first, physical second, a connection built on respect, subtle desire, and shared vulnerability. By the time the sun dipped completely below the horizon, the tension and playful teasing of earlier hours had evolved into something more profound. It was a quiet, simmering intimacy, one that promised deeper connection in the days to come. The playful flirtation had matured into emotional closeness, setting the stage for the slow-burn romance to continue. Delicate, respectful, and impossible to ignore. The following days carried a subtle, thrilling tension that neither of us could ignore. Each interaction became a careful dance, a blend of curiosity and restraint that heightened every glance, every touch, and every word. The kitchen, once simply a space for meals, had transformed into a stage where the slow burn of our connection played out, layered with emotion, desire, and restraint. She invited me to help with small tasks, chopping vegetables, arranging plates, or stirring sauces. At first, it seemed ordinary, mundane even, but the moments of proximity carried weight. Shoulders brushed as we moved side by side. Fingers met as we passed utensils, lingering slightly longer than necessary. A simple adjustment of a dish became an excuse to lean closer, to notice the warmth of her hand and the faint scent that always seemed to accompany her presence. Each minor touch was electric, a subtle testing of boundaries that neither of us could, or wanted to, ignore. Her laughter filled the air as she caught me off guard, teasing about how clumsily I handled a knife or how quickly I tasted the food before she did. The playful tone was layered with something more, an invitation to linger, a tacit acknowledgement of the tension simmering between us. Every smile, every tilt of her head, and every deliberate brush of her fingers was a quiet challenge, a test of curiosity, attraction, and self-control. Conversation became more intimate during these tasks. She shared small, personal reflections, moments from her past that revealed vulnerability beneath her confident exterior. In response, I found myself opening up, sharing thoughts and feelings I rarely voiced. These emotional exchanges deepened the connection, turning physical proximity into a conduit for trust and understanding. Every brush of hands or shoulders now carried meaning beyond mere accident. Each was a subtle experiment in how far closeness could go without breaking the invisible rules we both felt. One afternoon, while plating a dessert together, her fingers guided mine ever so lightly to adjust a garnish. The contact was fleeting, yet it lingered in my mind. The warmth of her skin, the softness of her hand, and the subtle intimacy of the moment made my heartbeat quicken. She looked at me with a knowing smile, a gentle tilt of the head that silently asked whether I felt the same pull, the same unspoken desire. Even the smallest gestures became charged. She would lean closer under the guise of checking seasoning, pause near me while stirring, or brush hair from her face in a way that drew my gaze. The tension between us was like a taut string, delicate, thrilling, and impossible to ignore. Every touch, every glance, every shared laugh felt like a careful exploration of boundaries, a dance of restraint and curiosity that neither of us wanted to end. By the end of the day, it was clear that the connection had grown stronger. The playful teasing, emotional vulnerability, and subtle touches had built a delicate intimacy, one that was both thrilling and deeply comforting. We were testing boundaries, not recklessly, but with awareness, with care, and with a growing desire that neither dared to name aloud. The slow burn attraction had matured into something tangible, yet still restrained, leaving both of us acutely aware of the magnetic pull between us and the promise of more to come. The following morning arrived with a calmness that contrasted sharply with the simmering tension of the previous days. Sunlight filtered softly through the kitchen windows, casting golden patterns across the counters and illuminating the lingering traces of our interactions. The faint aroma of herbs, the slight warmth in the air, and the quiet hum of the home. Everything felt slower, more deliberate, as if the house itself were holding its breath, attentive to the unspoken connection between us. She appeared in the doorway, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. Her presence was effortless, graceful, and magnetic. Every small movement, the tilt of her head, the subtle sway of her hair, the gentle curve of her lips, drew my gaze and made the room feel alive. I noticed the warmth in her eyes, a soft invitation to share this quiet moment together, and the faint scent of her perfume mingled naturally with the rich aroma of coffee. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, hands wrapped around the warm cups. Conversation began lightly, comments about the morning, plans for the day, and small, shared observations. But beneath these ordinary exchanges, there was an undeniable acknowledgement, a quiet, mutual understanding of the bond that had grown over days of subtle touches, lingering glances, and playful teasing. There was no need for words to spell it out. The connection was palpable in the spaces between sentences. Her hand brushed mine casually as she handed me a sugar packet, and the warmth lingered far longer than expected. It was a fleeting gesture, yet it carried all the weight of the slow-burn intimacy we had built. Every glance, every smile, and every light touch was a reinforcement of trust, curiosity, and a subtle attraction that neither of us had fully named. The playful teasing of earlier days had matured into a comfortable, gentle closeness, a sense of emotional safety that made every interaction feel profoundly significant. For a moment, we simply sat in companionable silence, savoring the coffee and the quiet presence of each other. Her gaze would occasionally meet mine, lingering just long enough to stir a flutter of warmth in my chest, and I could feel the rhythm of her breathing, steady and calm, mirroring the subtle steadiness of the connection we shared. Each small movement, leaning slightly forward, tucking hair behind an ear, adjusting the cup, carried meaning, shaping the unspoken intimacy between us. She spoke softly, almost as if testing the air. "You make this house feel alive." Her words struck a chord, and I realized the feeling was mutual. Every shared laugh, every lingering glance, Every playful touch had transformed ordinary moments into memories charged with warmth and meaning. The attraction that had begun as curiosity and subtle teasing had evolved into a steady, comforting intimacy, a connection that was both thrilling and profoundly human. As the morning moved on, we finished our coffee and carried out small, mundane tasks together, adjusting cushions, arranging dishes, sharing quiet laughter. Each action, simple in itself, reinforced the bond between us. The slow-burn romance, carefully nurtured through subtle touches, playful teasing, and emotional openness, had reached a natural, satisfying conclusion. By midday, it was clear the intrigue, the flirtation, and the tension had transformed into an enduring warmth. We didn't need grand gestures or overt declarations. The quiet understanding, the lingering touches, and the mutual respect and curiosity were enough to mark the completion of this chapter of our slow burn story. A gentle, fulfilling resolution that left both hearts quietly tethered to one another.